I'm going to ask if you will give me permission just to read aloud the first part of this, just in case some of you may not be able to see the screens all that well, or maybe you can hear a little bit better. I won't read the whole thing, but at least in the beginning. Is that all right?
Yes.
All right, so here we go. First of all, what we, in trying to keep with our communal discernment process for the entire chapter, that this would also certainly carry over into the way in which we may want to call forth our potential leaders for the next several years. So there are a few guiding principles about communal discernment as it applies to the election of leaders that are worth noting. So the first is this: any discernment is always based on the trust that God is the source of all that we are and all that we are trying to do. Also, that God is the one who already knows what we are seeking and wants to communicate with us. Letting God be larger, wiser, and greater than we are is a key shift. So we say that, but then when it comes to looking at the people that we're calling forth, we kind of forget that, and we think, I know best. Instead of, in discernment, we leave this in God's hands. There are specific structured discernment processes used to discern God's will at particular points of need in which we desire to align our lives and our ministries more fully with God's purposes. Again, it just goes back to what we've been saying all along. Communal discernment is the movement from I to we, always for the service of the greater good. Discernment includes the head, the heart, the spirit, and the body. We think and speak. We listen and wait. We feel and are moved. And we have physical sensations and responses. It is a whole person process. And this is key, sisters and associates. It is important to have inner freedom from prejudices, fears, preconceived notions, biases, and preferences, as well as a willingness to be changed. Prejudice, fear, biases are always blocks to God's ability to influence what we are about. It is important to look at and to embrace the reality in which we are in, and to analyze the situation and review the facts. We can be in discernment, but totally disconnected from the real world or our current reality. So you look around. You know who you are at this time. So it would be not to the best service of discernment to forget your current reality. We are called to consider personal reactions and feelings while measuring our ideals with our reality. Asking ourselves, what is the work that the Holy Spirit is doing in me and in us? And where does that Spirit want to lead us? Not where I want it to go, but where does the Spirit want us to go? Excuse me. So, I'm moving now into the process itself. So again, I would remind you, if you have some questions, then you may want to jot them down as we move forward. In this process, there is, we are not using probably the most common process that has been used in recent years of sending out endorsements or calls to individual sisters, asking them to consider elected leadership. This is not done. Instead, there are two opportunities for the Allegheny Franciscans, who are the vowed members, to call forth names for leadership. The first call will happen at the assemblies in March, April, and May of 2020. As a part of that assembly process, there will be a designated space where all will gather. There will be some contemplative prayer, reflection, some readings. It will be within a very contemplative, prayerful setting, and there will be some guided reflection. At some point during that prayerful, contemplative process, sisters will be invited to come forward to a microphone and call the name of a sister they would like to put forward for consideration for elected leadership. Each sister has the opportunity to call the name of a sister she believes has the gifts, experience, and stamina needed for leadership in the congregation at this time. Each name is called only once and is not repeated by another. This forms the initial list of nominees. So when each assembly has taken place, each assembly has had the opportunity to call forth a name. All of those names will be collated from all of the assemblies, and that will be given back to the congregation as the initial list of nominees. With me so far?
Yes.
Okay. I just said that. There will be another additional time when, during the chapter of affairs, to add names to the list who have not already been called. Now let me stop there and explain a little bit about this process. In waiting to call forth names while we are doing the work of chapter at the assembly, that's the first time. And the second time, during the chapter of affairs itself, directly connects the call of the person to the work that you are about. So there's not a disconnect, if that makes sense to you. Sometimes in the past, we've gone through a process of calling names and having a nomination list even before we started the work of chapter, or even were into chapter. So there was no connection. So in this process, what we're hoping is that as you are thinking about sisters in your congregation that you feel could be called to elected leadership, that you're asking yourself questions like, look at what we're doing. Who are the people that can guide us in this? Now, there's a little bit more about that in the PowerPoint, so I don't want to run ahead of myself. So, the first call happens at the assembly in the March, April, May of 2020. The second call happens during the chapter of affairs. During the chapter of affairs, the Allegheny vowed members will gather again in a contemplative setting to call forth names that will be added to the previous list. Based on what happened during the chapter work of the day, those gathered asked themselves, who would be a good person to shepherd this work? Or it could be a question, just turn it around a bit, in light of what we're doing, what kind of leadership do we need? Again, the calling is done within the context of prayer, contemplation, and guided reflection. Oftentimes in these reflections, reminding you of something that, some of the stuff you just did this morning, of your own heritage, of your own best selves, of what you deeply hold dear, and what touches your passion. So in total, there are 2 times when the group gathers to seek the Holy Spirit's guidance in calling forth sisters to serve in the ministry of elected leadership. The final list represents all those names who have been called. Now you will note, or if you haven't picked this up, there is no weighting to any of the names. And when I say W-E-I-G-H-T, there's no weight. So names are called only once. So when the list comes out, you don't know if there's a weighted number there or not, because you only call a name once. All right? So during the time of discernment, each sister nominated, this is at the chapter of election, each sister nominated will speak to the chapter body very briefly, sharing her own personal discernment regarding her availability and willingness to be considered for elected leadership and her vision for the chapter directions. She will also share the leadership positions or position for which she is willing to be considered. At this time, a sister may withdraw her name. The chapter body listens attentively to each sister and carefully discerns the sister's response to the call. So, a point to be raised here is, in the past, we have often generated a very robust list of nominees, only to have a good portion of those nominees withdraw their names almost immediately. That really thwarts both the personal and the communal discernment process. What we hope is that we would begin almost immediately to offer reflection materials for every professed member of the congregation, to begin right now to reflect and to pray about your own availability and willingness to serve if you are named. I saw it up here on some of your papers. To begin to see leadership as a generous act of service to your congregation. And it is. So to begin right now to pray, am I free? Am I willing? Am I generous enough to be considered for elected leadership? That starts right now. And it's for everybody. There is no withdrawing names until the chapter of election, because we need the other side, which is the communal discernment process. The congregation's right to discern your availability as well. So it's two-sided. It's not just my discernment, but it's my congregation's discernment as well. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. So if at that time when the sisters who have been nominated speak to the chapter body, they may at that time say something very simple like, my personal discernment has led me to withdraw my name at this time. And she may do that at that time, but not before. And as you all well know, when we're dealing with anyone's personal discernment, she doesn't have to tell you why. The chapter body listens attentively to each sister and then carefully discerns the sister's response to the call. So, following the calling of names, there will be an opportunity for everybody at chapter, those who are the fully engaged members and those who are the consulting sisters, to discuss those who have been called to elected leadership. And we will do a similar process that we have been doing all along. We will gather at home tables where each person shares both the gifts and the talents of, as well as any concerns about, those persons she believes are called to leadership at this time. So there will be adequate time provided at the home table for conversation regarding all of the nominees. So any number of sisters could be discussed at those home tables and affirmed by the home tables. Reasons to support a sister for elected leadership are discussed. So at the home table, and this is a critical piece, so I want you to really be sure you're getting what I'm saying here. At the home table, if a sister's name is affirmed by others, you may, and they add their own perspective regarding a sister's concerns, talents, and capacities. Others at the table may also speak to that. So if someone says, I affirm Alba, who's going to be Superior General in 6 years, I affirm Alba because I see in Alba a generosity of spirit, and she's got a lot of energy, and this is going to require, these next few years are going to require a lot of energy. So somebody else at the table might say, yes, I see that, and I also see in Alba that she's very technologically savvy, and that's going to be important too. Things like that. I think you can build on the gifts and the capacities and the talents of the sister who's under discussion. Now, a concern may only be named if the sister has been affirmed. If the sister has not been affirmed, there is no need to discuss concerns about her. I hope you're getting that. So if you say, I affirm Alba and I do support her for leadership, I have a concern, and this is my concern. I think she's a workaholic, and she may overwork and might not give herself enough self-care. But if I'm not affirming Alba for leadership, then I don't need to say any concerns. You got that? Yes. Okay. So after adequate time for conversation, the facilitator, excuse me, will instruct the home table to determine and agree on the names that they will carry forward to the consensus table, including the gifts, talents, capacities, and concerns of those they are affirming. Right? So sisters, move to the consensus table where, as you did yesterday, each person at the consensus table reads to the others the names of the persons, their talents, gifts, capacities, concerns that were raised at the home table. Now, what's a little bit different about this process is that at the consensus table, we're not really terribly trying to arrive at consensus. We are simply beginning to get a sense, is there a movement in the body towards some persons? Are there some names rising to the top? Okay? So that at the consensus table, the conversation then is to raise awareness about the sisters who have been discussed and affirmed at the home tables. So the sisters will then begin to say, is there someone at this table, at the consensus table, that we're all saying yes to, that we all can affirm? Or are there some people here that most of us can affirm, but not all of us? So at the end of the consensus table conversation, we will have some large Post-its like this. We will have green ones. And the green Post-its, we will write simply a name. And that name is, say, on a green Post-it says, everybody at our consensus table is affirming this person. If everybody cannot affirm, then we have large pink Post-its. And then you write that name there, basically saying, not everybody at our table can affirm this person, but she was seriously considered, but did not receive full endorsement. Those green and pink Post-its are again posted on the wall. They are not votes. They are simply giving you a visual of what seems to be some of the movement of the body. Now, the green and pink Post-its will remain on the wall only for a short time, allowing all to see what seems to be generated by the whole. Now, after all have had a chance to look at the Post-its on the wall, they will be removed. So, the home table, consensus table process is simply meant to be a tool to assist the communal discernment process. It does not limit your right to vote for anyone in the congregation who is eligible. And I want to say that again. Whatever comes up on this wall and whatever is the fruit of your conversation, what you're seeing is these are the movements of the body. However, that does not take away your personal freedom to vote for anyone you choose. That's your canonical right. You don't even have to vote for anybody who's on the list. You could vote for any professed member who's eligible according to your constitutions. Can you wait till I just finished and then I'll do that? All right, so you, on the day of the election, each sister is elected individually by secret ballot according to the norms that are stated in your constitutions. And that's the way the process goes.